You're threatening me? I'm calling the police. Claire's voice cut through the afternoon air like a knife as I stood in the doorway of my childhood home, a stack of real estate papers clutched in my trembling hands. My sister's face was twisted with rage, her phone already pressed to her ear. I opened my mouth to protest, to explain that I was simply organizing the sale of our late grandmother's house as her will had instructed, but Claire was already speaking to the dispatcher. My sister is threatening me. Please send someone quickly. I'm scared. The lie fell from her lips so smoothly that for a moment I wondered if I was living in some alternate reality. Within minutes, 2 police cruisers pulled up to the curb, their red and blue lights painting the quiet suburban street in harsh colors. Neighbors emerged from their homes, phones in hand, recording the spectacle. Officer Williams approached cautiously while his partner stayed back. Ma'am, we received a call about a disturbance. I watched Claire's face transform into a mask of fear, complete with tears that seemed to appear from nowhere. She was yelling at me, threatening to hurt me if I didn't leave. My stomach dropped as the officers turned their attention to me, their expressions shifting from neutral to suspicious. Behind Claire's shoulder, I caught the smallest glimpse of a smirk before she wiped her eyes dramatically. My name is Martha Chen. I'm 32 years old, and I'm from Portland, Maine. Before I continue with what happened that horrible afternoon, please subscribe to this channel for more stories about family betrayal, justice, and standing up for yourself when everyone tries to knock you down. What I'm about to share with you changed my entire life in ways I never could have imagined. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment across town, replaying every moment of the humiliation. The officers had been professional but firm, asking me to leave the property while they sorted things out. They hadn't arrested me, but the message was clear. I was the problem in their eyes. My parents called around 8 o'clock. Martha, what happened today? My mother asked, her voice careful and measured. I explained the situation, how I'd simply been following Grandma's instructions to sell the house and split the proceeds between Claire and me. Claire says you were very aggressive. My father interjected on the other line. She was frightened, Martha. Maybe you should have been more sensitive about the whole thing. The words stung worse than any physical blow could have. They weren't asking for my side. They were telling me I'd done something wrong. After he hung up, I scrolled through social media and felt my heart sink further. Someone had posted a video of the police arriving, captioning it with speculation about what horrible thing I must have done. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay in the darkness, staring at my ceiling and feeling the weight of injustice pressing down on my chest like a boulder. Everything I'd worked for, my reputation in our tight-knit community, my relationship with my parents, all of it felt like it was crumbling because of Claire's lie. But as dawn broke through my bedroom window, something shifted inside me. Anger transformed into something colder and more focused. I wasn't going to scream or cry or beg anyone to believe me. Instead, I was going to be strategic. I pulled out my laptop and created a folder labeled documentation. Inside, I began organizing everything: the will, emails with Claire about the house, text messages where she'd agreed to the sale just weeks ago. Every piece of evidence that showed the truth. 3 days later, while going through Grandma's old files in my storage unit, I found something that made my hands shake. Bank statements from the family trust fund that Grandma had managed showed irregular withdrawals over the past 2 years. Large sums, always just under the amount that would trigger automatic review. The dates corresponded with Claire's sudden lifestyle upgrades, the new car, the expensive vacations she'd posted about online. My sister hadn't just lied to the police about me. She'd been stealing from our family for years. I needed an ally. Someone who knew both Claire and me well enough to recognize the truth when they saw it. Patricia Morgan had lived next door to our grandmother for 30 years and had watched Claire and me grow up. She'd always been kind, the type of neighbor who brought casseroles when someone was sick and remembered everyone's birthdays. I invited her for coffee at a quiet cafe downtown. Patricia, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen with an open mind. Over the next hour, I laid out everything: the police incident, my parents' reaction, and most importantly, the evidence of Claire's financial manipulation. I showed her copies of the bank statements, pointing out the pattern. Patricia's expression grew darker as she absorbed the information. I've been noticing things too, she admitted quietly. Claire told me last week that you'd been acting erratically, that the family was worried about your mental state. I didn't want to believe it, but when I saw the police cars... She's been setting the stage, I said, the realization hitting me hard, making me look unstable before I could defend myself. What are you going to do? Patricia asked. I'm going to prove the truth, I replied. But I need to be smart about it. Meanwhile, Claire wasn't sitting idle. She'd apparently noticed my quiet confidence and decided to escalate. She started showing up places I frequented, making loud comments to mutual acquaintances about how worried she was about me. 2 weeks after the police incident, I made a decision that surprised everyone who knew me. Instead of selling Grandma's house quickly to get away from the whole mess, I decided to renovate it. Grandma's will had left me the authority to make decisions about the property, with Claire receiving an equal share of any proceeds. But there was no timeline specified. The house was a beautiful Victorian with good bones but needed serious updating. I hired contractors and began the transformation, pouring my savings and energy into turning it into something special, a bed and breakfast that would honor Grandma's memory while creating something valuable for the future. My parents were confused by this move. Why are you wasting money on that old place? My mother asked over the phone. Just sell it and move on. But I had a vision. Every morning, I arrived at 6 to work alongside the contractors. I stripped wallpaper, refinished floors, and carefully restored the original architectural details that made the house unique. The physical labor felt therapeutic, each hammer blow driving away some of the anger and hurt. One afternoon, Claire showed up with 2 of her friends. She walked through the house making loud, dismissive comments about every improvement. This color is hideous, she announced, pointing at the sage green-eyed, painted the dining room. Who's going to want to stay in this dump? But her friends seemed impressed despite her negativity, and I noticed them whispering to each other, nodding appreciatively at the craftsmanship. I decided it was time to try once more with my parents. I invited them to the house, hoping that seeing the renovations and having a calm conversation might help them understand what was really happening. They arrived on a Saturday afternoon, and I could see my mother's surprise at how beautiful the house was becoming. It looks wonderful, Martha, she admitted, running her hand along the restored banister. Grandma would have loved this. I seized the moment. Mom, Dad, I need to show you something. I pulled out the bank statements, along with a timeline I'd created showing Claire's withdrawals and her sudden increase in spending. Claire's been taking money from the family trust. Thousands of dollars over 2 years. My father's expression hardened immediately. That's a serious accusation, Martha. It's not an accusation, it's documentation, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Look at the dates and amounts. But my mother shook her head. Claire explained those withdrawals months ago. Grandma approved them for her to help with some business investments that didn't work out. The explanation was so perfectly crafted that I realized Claire had been planning this defense for a long time. Did Grandma tell you that herself? I asked. My parents exchanged glances. Well, no, my father admitted. Claire told us after Grandma passed. They left shortly after, still not fully believing me, but I could see a seed of doubt had been planted. The bed and breakfast, I'd named it Rose Manor, after Grandma's favorite flowers, opened its doors 3 months after I'd started renovations. My first guests were a couple celebrating their anniversary, and they left a glowing review online praising every detail from the comfortable rooms to the homemade breakfast I'd prepared. More bookings followed. The local newspaper did a feature on the restoration of the historic home, and suddenly Rose Manor was being talked about all over town. I hired a part-time housekeeper named Diane who had worked at hotels for years. She was efficient and kind, and she quickly became someone I could trust. One morning, Diane pulled me aside with a concerned expression. I need to tell you something, she said quietly. Yesterday, a woman came by claiming to be your sister. She was very friendly at first, asking me all sorts of questions about how the business was running and who made the decisions. What did she want? I asked, though I could already guess. She started making comments about you, Diane continued. suggesting you weren't quite stable, that the family was concerned. She implied I should be careful working for you. My jaw tightened. What did you tell her? I told her I'd worked in hospitality for 15 years and I'm an excellent judge of character, Diane said with a small smile. Then I politely asked her to leave. The next day, another staff member reported a similar visit from Claire, this time trying to question the reliability of my bookkeeping. The monthly neighborhood association meeting fell on a warm evening in late spring. I'd been avoiding these meetings since the police incident, but Patricia had encouraged me to attend. You need to remind people who you really are, she'd said. The community center was packed when I arrived. I took a seat near the back, hoping to stay unnoticed, but Claire spotted me immediately. Her eyes narrowed, and I watched her whisper something to the woman sitting next to her. When the floor opened for new business, Claire's hand shot up. I'd like to address a concern about the new bed and breakfast on Maple Street, she announced, standing. While the house looks nice from the outside, I'm worried about the way it's being managed. The property belongs to our family, and decisions are being made without proper consultation or financial transparency. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was it. The moment Claire had been building toward, trying to publicly paint me as irresponsible or worse. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding but my voice steady. Since my sister has brought this up publicly, I'd like to respond. I pulled out a folder from my bag. The house was left to both of us in our grandmother's will, with clear instructions that I have authority over management decisions. I have all the documentation here, including the portions of the will relevant to the property. Additionally, I have financial records showing every expense and profit from Rose Manor, which I'd be happy to share with any association member who's interested. The meeting ended with most neighbors approaching me to offer support rather than suspicion. I watched Claire's face redden as person after person congratulated me on the bed and breakfast and asked about booking rooms. One woman who approached me after everyone else had left was someone I'd seen around the neighborhood, but never really knew. Her name was Victoria Santos, and she'd lived 2 streets over for decades. I need to tell you something, Victoria said, glancing around to make sure we were relatively alone. I've known your sister for years, and I've watched her operate. She's very good at manipulating situations to her advantage. Did something happen? I asked. Victoria nodded. About 5 years ago, she tried something similar with me. She borrowed money, claimed it was for an emergency, then told everyone I'd given it to her as a gift when I asked for it back. She almost destroyed my reputation in this community before the truth came out. Why didn't anyone warn me? I felt a surge of frustration. People don't like to speak ill of others, especially in families, Victoria replied. And Claire is very charming when she wants to be. But I've been watching what's been happening to you, and I think it's time someone stood with you. Over the next few weeks, Victoria and I developed a plan. She would quietly share her own experience with trusted neighbors while I continued to build up Rose Manor's reputation through excellent service and community involvement. One evening, while organizing papers in my home office, I stumbled upon something extraordinary. In a folder of old emails I'd printed out months ago, I found a thread I'd completely forgotten about. It was from just days after the police incident, Claire writing to her friend Bethany, someone she'd known since college. I'd been copied on it accidentally when Claire had replied all to an email chain we were both on. I can't believe how well that worked, Claire had written. The police totally bought it. Em actually looked guilty standing there with all those papers, like she'd been caught doing something wrong. Now everyone in the family thinks she's unstable. This is going to make everything so much easier going forward. Once I get control of the house, I can flip it for way more than she's planning to sell it for. Her little renovation project is just making me richer, and she doesn't even know it. My hands trembled as I read further. There were more emails outlining Claire's plan to gradually take over Rose Manor. She'd already consulted with a lawyer about challenging my authority over the property, claiming I was mentally unfit to manage it. The documented proof of her intentional manipulation was right there in black and white. I immediately made multiple copies, storing them in different locations, including a cloud backup and a copy with my own attorney. But I didn't reveal them yet. This was ammunition for when the moment was exactly right. Claire's patience finally ran out on a busy Saturday afternoon at Rose Manor. I was helping a family check in when she burst through the front door, her voice loud enough to echo through the entire house. "We need to talk, Martha. Now." The family looked uncomfortable as Claire planted herself in the middle of the foyer, arms crossed. "Excuse me for just one moment," I said to my guests, maintaining my professional composure. I guided Claire into the small office off the main hallway. "What is this about?" "I've been patient," Claire hissed. "But this has gone on long enough. This house belongs to both of us, and I deserve my share. I'm demanding you pay me 50% of its current value, or I'm taking legal action." I pulled out a folder from my desk drawer. "This house does belong to both of us," I agreed calmly. "But Grandma's will very specifically gives me management authority. You're entitled to 50% of any profits when we decide to sell, but that decision is mine to make." I showed her the relevant section of the will, highlighted in yellow. "As for legal action, you're welcome to try. But you should know that I've documented every conversation we've had about this property, including your agreement to the renovation 3 months ago." Claire's face went purple. "You can't do this. I need that money now." "Then perhaps you should get a job like the rest of us," I replied. She slammed her hand on the desk. "This isn't over," she spat before storming out, nearly knocking over a lamp on her way. I decided Rose Manor needed to become more than just a business. It needed to be a community asset. I organized a charity event for the local children's hospital, offering the house and grounds for an elegant fundraising dinner. The response was overwhelming. Local businesses donated food and decorations, and tickets sold out within a week. The event raised over $15,000, and the local news covered it with a glowing segment about the historic house and its community spirit. Claire, of course, tried to sabotage it. She called the caterer the morning of the event, claiming to be me and attempting to cancel the food order. Fortunately, the caterer called me to confirm, and I was able to stop the cancellation. But Claire didn't stop there. She showed up at the event itself, uninvited, and tried to position herself as a co-host. "My grandmother's house looks beautiful, doesn't it?" she said loudly to a group of donors. "My sister and I worked so hard on this together." Before I could respond, Patricia stepped forward. "Actually, Claire, I believe Martha did all this work herself. In fact, didn't you tell me just last month that you thought the renovation was a waste of time?" The awkward silence that followed was broken only when Claire made a hasty excuse and left early. That night, I overheard 2 neighborhood association members talking near the garden. "Did you see how Claire tried to take credit?" "She's always been like that," the other responded. "Remember when Martha got that scholarship to college? Claire told everyone she'd helped her sister study." It was the first time I'd heard neighbors openly criticize my sister. My strategy moving forward was simple: continue building Rose Manor's success while quietly gathering evidence. Every interaction with Claire was documented. Every financial transaction was meticulously recorded. Every statement she made to others was noted by my growing network of trusted friends. I consulted with my attorney, a sharp woman named Beverly Torres who specialized in estate law. "You're building a strong case," Beverly told me during one of our meetings. "But you need to be patient. If this goes to court, you want overwhelming evidence, not just enough to win." Meanwhile, Rose Manor continued to thrive. We were booked solid for the next 3 months, and I'd been approached about doing a feature in a regional travel magazine. I hired additional staff and started planning an expansion of the gardens. One afternoon, I was meeting with a landscape designer when I noticed Claire sitting in a car across the street, watching the house. She'd been doing this more frequently, her desperation becoming more obvious. That evening, I received a call from Beverly. "Claire's attorney just contacted me," she said. "They're threatening a lawsuit claiming you've mismanaged the estate and demanding immediate compensation." "Do they have any grounds?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "None whatsoever based on what you've shown me," Beverly replied. "But we need to be ready. I'm going to need all your documentation, every piece of evidence you've collected." I smiled slightly. I've been preparing for this since the day she called the police on me. My parents invited both Claire and me to dinner at their house, a forced family meeting that I'd been dreading but knew was inevitable. We sat around the dining room table where we'd shared countless meals growing up, but the atmosphere was anything but nostalgic. "We need to resolve this situation," my father announced. "This fighting between you two is tearing our family apart." Claire jumped in immediately. "I just want what's fair. Martha has shut me out of all decisions about Grandma's house. She's treating it like it's only hers." I pulled out a tablet and opened a file. "Would you like to see the email from March where Claire wrote, and I quote, 'Do whatever you want at the house. I don't have time to deal with renovation projects.'" My mother looked surprised. "Claire, you said Martha refused to consult you." "I changed my mind," Claire said quickly. "I'm allowed to have input." "Of course you are," I agreed. "But you're not allowed to lie about why you're suddenly interested." I pulled up another document. "Here's a copy of the text messages where you told me you thought turning it into a bed and breakfast was stupid and would never work. That was 4 months ago." The room fell silent. I continued, keeping my voice level. "Here's a bank statement showing a withdrawal of $5,000 from the family trust with your signature. Here's another for $7,500, and another for $6,000. My father leaned forward, studying the screen. For the first time, I saw real doubt cross his face. "Claire, what were these for?" The dinner ended with no resolution, but I could see the foundation of my parents' absolute trust in Claire beginning to crack. Over the next 2 weeks, I noticed subtle shifts in how people in the neighborhood treated both of us. Victoria had been true to her word, quietly sharing her own experience with Claire to people who would listen. More importantly, people were witnessing Claire's behavior firsthand. One incident stood out particularly. Mrs. Henderson, who lived 3 houses down from Rose Manor, was walking her dog past the property when she saw Claire trying to intimidate one of my guests. The guest had parked slightly over the property line into the street, a minor issue that happened occasionally on our narrow road. Claire had apparently berated the guest, claiming they were creating a public nuisance and threatening to have their car towed. Mrs. Henderson had intervened, firmly telling Claire to leave the guest alone. Later, she'd called me to apologize for not realizing sooner what kind of person Claire really was. "I always thought she was so charming," Mrs. Henderson said. "But watching her yell at that poor couple over a parking spot that wasn't even a problem, well, it opened my eyes." The incident was discussed at the next neighborhood association meeting, though Claire wasn't present to defend herself. The walls were closing in, and she must have felt it. I received 3 aggressive text messages from her that night, each one more unhinged than the last, and I saved every single one. The local Historic Preservation Society announced their annual awards, and Rose Manor was nominated for Best Restoration of a Historic Property. The ceremony was held at the town's nicest hotel, and nearly every notable person in our community attended. When they announced Rose Manor as the winner, I walked to the stage feeling a mixture of pride and vindication. My acceptance speech was brief and gracious, thanking my contractors, staff, and the neighborhood for their support. As I returned to my seat with the Crystal Award, I spotted Claire near the back of the room. Before I could process what was happening, she stood up during the reception and approached a reporter from the local paper. I watched from across the room as she spoke animatedly, gesturing toward me. The reporter was nodding, taking notes. My heart sank. Well, I was Claire spinning now. But Patricia, who had been standing nearby, intervened. She pulled out her phone and showed the reporter something. The reporter's expression changed from interested to skeptical. Later, Patricia explained. She was trying to claim she'd been instrumental in the restoration, that you'd basically stolen her ideas and excluded her from the recognition. "What did you show the reporter?" I asked. "The article from 3 months ago where you were interviewed about the project," Patricia smiled. "The one where you mentioned that you'd done all the work yourself because your sister had no interest in the property. Plus screenshots of Claire's social media posts calling the whole project a waste of money." The next day's newspaper article about the awards mentioned only my name, with a beautiful photo of Rose Manor and several quotes from neighbors about the positive impact the bed and breakfast had on the community. 2 days after the award ceremony, my parents requested another meeting. This time, they came to Rose Manor, and I could see they were looking at the property and me differently. We sat in the garden with tea, the late afternoon sun casting everything in golden light. "We need to talk about Claire," my mother began, her voice heavy. "We've been going over the bank statements you showed us, and we contacted the trustee for Grandma's estate. The withdrawals, they weren't authorized the way Claire claimed." My father looked older than I'd ever seen him. "We confronted her yesterday. She admitted she'd taken the money without proper approval, but she insists she was going to pay it back. She's been stealing for 2 years," I said quietly. "And she would have kept stealing if I hadn't found the records." "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" my mother asked. "I tried. I reminded them. You didn't believe me. You took her word over mine, just like you did when she called the police with that lie." The silence that followed was painful, but necessary. "We also need to address what happened that day," my father finally said. "We should have listened to your side of the story. We should have questioned why Claire would call the police instead of just talking to you." "She called them because she knew it would make me look guilty," I said. "It was calculated. She wanted to destroy my credibility before I could expose what she'd been doing." My mother had tears in her eyes. "We failed you, Martha. We let our assumptions about both of you cloud our judgment." Claire's promised lawsuit materialized 2 weeks later. A process server showed up at Rose Manor with legal papers claiming I had mismanaged the estate, excluded Claire from rightful decision-making, and was operating a business on family property without proper authorization. The claims were so ridiculous that Beverly laughed when she read them. "This is actually good for us," she said. "Claire's attorney has overreached. These allegations are easily disproven, and filing a frivolous lawsuit might actually work in your favor." Beverly filed a comprehensive response, including every piece of documentation I'd collected over the past 6 months. The bank statements showing Claire's unauthorized withdrawals. The emails where she'd admitted to manipulating the police situation. The text messages where she'd explicitly given me permission to manage the property. The testimony of multiple neighbors about her behavior. But Beverly also took an additional step that surprised me. "I'm filing for a restraining order on your behalf," she explained. "Claire's harassment has been escalating. The threatening texts, the attempts to sabotage your business, showing up at your property uninvited. This constitutes a pattern that justifies legal protection." The hearing for the restraining order was scheduled for 2 weeks out. In the meantime, I was instructed to document any and all contact with Claire. I didn't have to wait long. Claire showed up at Rose Manor 3 times in 4 days, each time becoming more aggressive, and each time being witnessed by either staff or guests who provided written statements about her behavior. The monthly neighborhood meeting took on a different tone than any before it. The association president, Mr. Jameson, opened the floor by announcing that Rose Manor had been selected as a community partner for the upcoming summer festival. "Martha has generously offered to host several events at the property," he explained. "The association board voted unanimously to recognize her contributions to our neighborhood." One by one, neighbors stood to share positive experiences. The couple whose anniversary I'd helped celebrate. Mrs. Henderson talking about how the property had gone from an eyesore to a jewel. The owner of the local cafe thanking me for recommending her pastries to my guests. I noticed Claire wasn't present, which was unusual. She typically never missed an opportunity to be in the center of neighborhood business. After the meeting ended, Victoria pulled me aside. "Claire has been calling some of the board members," she told me quietly, "trying to get them to reconsider the festival partnership. She's claiming you're unstable and that the property isn't safe for events." Did anyone believe her? I asked, my chest tightening. "Not a single person," Victoria smiled. In fact, Mr. Jameson told her that if she continued making unfounded accusations, she might be asked to step back from association activities. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. The community had made its choice about who to trust, and for once, it wasn't Claire who'd won their loyalty. The confrontation I'd been both dreading and anticipating came on a humid Tuesday afternoon. I was in the kitchen preparing for afternoon tea service when I heard shouting from the front of the house. Claire had pushed past Diane and was storming through Rose Manor, her face flushed with rage. "You've turned everyone against me," she screamed. "My own parents won't even talk to me. All because of your lies." Guests emerged from their rooms, drawn by the commotion. Diane had already called the police, I learned later. "I haven't told any lies," I said calmly, though my heart was racing. That's all you've ever needed to say. The truth. The truth. Claire laughed bitterly. You've manipulated everyone with your perfect victim routine. Poor Martha, so responsible, so honest. Well, I'm done playing along. She pulled out her phone. I'm going to post everything online. Every family secret, every embarrassing moment from your past. I'm going to destroy you the way you've destroyed me. Go ahead, I replied, and I meant it, because I'm going to show them this. I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder containing all my documentation. The bank statements. The emails where she'd admitted to manipulating the police situation. The texts where she'd threatened me. The statements from neighbors about her harassment. And I'm going to show them this. I pulled up the emails where she'd outlined her plan to take over the property and benefit from my renovation work. Claire's face went pale as she recognized her own words on the screen. At that moment, Officer Williams and his partner, the same officers who'd responded to Claire's original call 6 months ago, walked through the front door. The police took statements from everyone present. Multiple guests had recorded Claire's outburst on their phones. Diane provided a detailed account of Claire's forced entry and threatening behavior. I calmly presented the restraining order application and all the supporting documentation. Officer Williams read through everything, his expression growing more serious with each page. Ms. Claire, I need you to come with us, he finally said. You're not under arrest, but we need to have a formal conversation at the station about these allegations. My parents arrived shortly after, having been called by a neighbor who'd witnessed the scene. They stood in the foyer of Rose Manor, looking between Claire being escorted to a police car and me standing exhausted but resolute in the doorway. Later that evening, after my parents had taken Claire home and I'd reassured all my guests, I sat down and wrote a letter. Not just to my family, but to the entire community. I submitted it to the local newspaper's opinion section. In it, I detailed the past 6 months, not with anger or blame, but with honesty. I explained the false police call, the financial manipulation, and the systematic attempts to destroy my reputation and business. I included facts, timelines, and supporting evidence. But I also wrote about forgiveness, about understanding that hurt people, and about the importance of speaking truth even when it's difficult. The letter was published 3 days later and shared thousands of times on social media. My inbox flooded with messages of support from people I'd never met, sharing their own stories of family betrayal and eventual healing. Rose Manor entered its busiest season yet. We were booked through the end of the year, with a waiting list for cancellations. I hired 2 more staff members and began planning a small expansion to add 2 additional guest rooms. The charity events I'd organized became regular occurrences, and Rose Manor's reputation grew beyond our immediate community. Claire's life had taken a very different path. The legal consequences of her actions were real and unavoidable. She was ordered to repay the money she'd taken from the family trust, which meant selling her car and moving into a smaller apartment. The restraining order was granted, prohibiting her from coming within 500 feet of me or my property. More painful for her than any legal penalty was the social isolation. The same community that had once found her charming now saw her clearly. Invitations stopped coming. Friends drifted away. Her social media posts received fewer and fewer responses until she eventually made her accounts private. 3 months after the final confrontation, Claire sent me a letter through my attorney. In it, she asked for a chance to talk, to explain, to somehow make things right. The letter was well written and seemed genuinely remorseful, but Beverly advised caution. People can change, Beverly said. But that change needs to be demonstrated over time, not just expressed in words. I wrote back, not a refusal, but not an acceptance either. I told Claire that I was open to eventual reconciliation, but it would require her taking genuine responsibility for her actions, not just to me, but to everyone she'd hurt. And it would require time. Standing in the garden of Rose Manor one autumn evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I reflected on everything I'd learned over the past year. The most important lesson wasn't about revenge or justice, though both had played their parts. It was about the power of patience and integrity when facing someone else's manipulation. When Claire had called the police that day, she tried to make me the villain in a story where I was actually the victim. Her lie had been designed to preemptively discredit me before I could expose her theft and manipulation. But lies, even convincing ones, can't stand forever against consistent truth. I'd learned that defending yourself doesn't mean stooping to your enemy's level. It means being so meticulous, so honest, so undeniably truthful that eventually the facade cracks and reality becomes impossible to ignore. I'd learned that communities are generally good at recognizing genuine character once they have enough information. The same neighbors who'd initially believed Claire's lies had eventually seen through them, not because I'd campaigned against her, but because her actions repeatedly contradicted her words. Most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to focus on building something positive while others exhaust themselves trying to tear you down. Every hour I'd spent improving Rose Manor had been an hour I wasn't spending on revenge. And in the end, my success spoke louder than any accusation could have. Just when I thought the drama had finally settled, Claire attempted one final manipulation. She convinced a local blogger who didn't know the full story to write a sympathetic piece about her, painting herself as the victim of a vindictive sister who'd stolen her inheritance. The article appeared online on a slow news day and briefly gained traction. Within hours, my phone was ringing with reporters wanting my side. But I didn't need to scramble for a response. Beverly released a simple statement directing anyone interested to the court records, all of which were public. The bank statements showing Claire's theft, the restraining order with its detailed justification, the testimony from multiple witnesses about her behavior. What Claire hadn't counted on was that the blogger, a young woman named Maya who took her reputation seriously, would do actual research once the story started getting attention. Maya called me directly, apologizing for not investigating more thoroughly before publishing. I believed her because she seemed so sincere, Maya admitted. I'm going to publish a correction and a follow-up with the actual facts. The second article, featuring interviews with neighbors, staff members, and documentation of Claire's actions, went even more viral than the first. This time, the story spread with truth behind it. Claire's final attempt at manipulation had spectacularly backfired, reinforcing everything I'd been saying while destroying whatever remained of her credibility. I felt no joy in it, just a deep sense of relief that the truth was finally, completely, undeniably established. The summer festival that Rose Manor hosted became an annual tradition. The garden was filled with lights and laughter, with families enjoying music and food while supporting local charities. My parents attended, their relationship with me slowly healing through honest conversations and their genuine efforts to make amends for not believing me sooner. Patricia and Victoria were there, along with Diane and the rest of my staff who'd become like family. Mr. Jameson gave a speech thanking me for my contributions to the neighborhood. Even Beverly came, joking that she'd never had a client who documented everything so thoroughly that her job became easier instead of harder. As I moved through the crowd that evening, accepting congratulations and appreciation, I thought about Claire. She wasn't there, of course. The restraining order was still in effect. But I'd heard through my parents that she'd started therapy and was slowly, genuinely beginning to acknowledge the damage she'd caused. Maybe someday we'd have a relationship again. Maybe not. But either way, I'd built a life I was proud of, surrounded by people who valued honesty and integrity.